Hi, Felix.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, good. How are you, Alejandra?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have my shirt for Ann Arbor anyway on.
Great. I won that one.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
Felix, it's so great to see you again.
Yeah, it's wonderful
Um,
to see you.
and I have to say that I have been having such a great time sharing with all of you, with all my friends and peers from the University of Michigan. So thank you very much for being here this morning. And I know you changed your time last night, so so it's an hour earlier for all of you. So I will try to manage that and see if I can change my time here too, so we can all be together. Felix, I always like to start this question by asking where are you from and how music came into your life.
Yeah, well, thanks. This is wonderful, and I love this idea. And it's great to see you again. I guess it was just about a year and a half ago, maybe.
Yes. Mhm.
But before that, it had been 20 years or something. It had been a long time. Yeah, so I started playing the cello when I was around five. My father really wanted me to play an instrument. He came to the States in the late '60s, and my mother shortly after that. And so he always had a love for classical music, even when he was back in Taiwan. And from what I gather, he was one of the only students there on his hall that had a record player.
Mm.
And they would borrow records from, I think, from a professor at the university who would loan them records of Western music. Um, and so, my father, one of my father's friends, was describing that, oh, your dad had this record player, and then we would all go to his room, and he would put these records on of Western music, and it was very very strange. But they all listened with fascination to this. So he had a long time interest. So then when he came to the States, um, he also had an interest in Russian language. So he ended up down the road from Michigan at Michigan State doing grad work and working a little bit there in the libraries. But he was studying Russian while he was there. So his favorite artists were Oistrakh and Rostropovich, and um, so then along I came, and when I was about five, he asked me if I wanted to play an instrument, and I was sort of fine with that. I didn't have a burning desire to, but I remember a conversation. We were in the car, and he said, "Well, I think it's about time that maybe you should play an instrument." I said, "Oh, okay." He's like, "What do you think about the cello?" And I probably said something like, "What's that?" But anyway, so it was going to be the cello, and so then I just started taking Suzuki method from um, a woman named Marilyn Kessler, who was a wonderful teacher and one of the most important early cello early childhood cello teachers in the country. She helped to do the Suzuki books and things like that. And she hosted a big Suzuki festival every year in our town, Okemos, which is a suburb of East Lansing. Um, and so I didn't know that I was getting such a wonderful education and all exposure to all these great teachers for this festival, and I just thought it was kind of common. But I found out later, people's like, "Oh, I remember, I went to your town for that," And for me, I was just walking down the block, and like all these kids from all over the country were showing up, and teachers from all over. Um, and the interesting thing was, I found out later that my father actually um, wanted to sign me up for violin lessons, and Marilyn Kessler, I think, said something to him like, "Oh, that'd be fine. You know, our violin program is doing really well. I'm wondering, you know, like we're trying to build our cello program too. Whether it might be okay if would you have any interest in starting him on the cello?" And my father said, "Oh, sure, let's just do that." And um, I didn't find this out till I was about 20 or 21. You know, and she had relayed that story to me, and I was like, I've never heard of that my whole life. And you know, she was saying, wasn't it lucky that, you know, I asked your dad to do the cello instead of violin? And I said, what? Whoa, hold on. You mean just because you asked for that, my whole life could have been completely different if you had not just on a whim just sort of said, how about cello instead? And you know, so that was a very sort of shocking moment for me, and it kind of sent me for a little bit of a loop. You know, the idea of little small things through life that can really change the course of everything. But so I was with her until middle school, and in a wonderful program there. Many professional musicians have been produced from that program, and as well as just music lovers and people that appreciated it. It was, you know, kind of pretty far ahead of its time.
Mm.
Um, and then I switched over to Louis Potter Jr., who had retired teaching at Michigan State, and so he was still in town, and he always had, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 of us pre-college kids,
Mhm.
um, and he was a wonderful old soul, and you know, his human qualities were, I would say, were of the highest order. I always admired him and appreciated his, um, you know, his time and his thoughtfulness and his care and his love for the cello, his love for music, just always poured out of him every week. And so I really, you know, am close to him, was close to him for that, and appreciated that. So yeah,
That's,
and then yeah, go ahead.
so that's it's interesting how all these stories happen in our lives. When I was 5 years old, my father thought that it would be a good idea for me to start playing violin. So I went to the main teacher in my hometown, who used to teach little kids in this at the university, local university. So I go in there. I don't remember this, but like you, I heard this story later on, that the teacher looked at my hand, and he said, "Oh, her hands are too small. Tell, bring her back in 2 or 3 years." You know, I was like, what is that? You know,
Yeah,
it's interesting, but I guess all things happen for a reason, no?
yeah,
That we don't know.
right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
So
but
Felix,
yeah.
so you're from Michigan.
Uh-huh. So I grew up in Lansing, or I was born in Lansing, and then I grew up in Okemos, and we all the way through childhood, we basically didn't move at all.
Oh,
And I mean, I think we ended up, I think we bought a house when I was 5, and then we moved to a different part of Okemos, um, you know, 5 or 6 years after that. But I went all the way through my time there. Um, and I was pretty lucky just to have these two wonderful teachers guide me, you know, talking to other people's experiences. That's not always so common. They're bouncing around from teacher to teacher trying to find the right one. But um, for me, I was lucky.
um, I'm something stuck on my mind while you were talking about your father. No, while he was in Taiwan and he was listening to this music. No, I'm curious to know, did he ever share with you what was, how did this music felt like differently? Did he
Um,
say something?
no, not actually. I guess we've never really spoken about that, and I should ask him more about those early times when he first started listening to it,
Mm.
because it was not, it was not just not common to hear. But yeah, I realized later what that my father has a wonderful ear. Of course, when I was young, I didn't want to admit it, right? So like I'm sitting there, and, like he was the practice parent, and so he's like, no, you got to do that again. This doesn't sound good. And of course, like all children, I resisted. Like, you don't know what you're talking about, or you like, that's not what the teacher said, or something. But
Exactly.
he knows several languages, and was always very um, just found that fascinating, the process of learning languages, and so he's got a very good ear,
Mm.
which I discovered later, when we would once I had become a more sophisticated musician, and we would occasionally have conversations about either my playing or somebody else's playing, or recordings that we heard, and then I started to realize, okay, yeah, actually, Dad kind of knows a fair amount. And I remember when I was doing a competition one time, and they came out to see it, and there were like 25 or 30 semifinalists, and they had to whittle it down to 5 people to get to the finals, and he had just sat there like the whole time over the course of 2 or 3 days or whatever, listening. And when it was done, I said, well, what do you think? Do you think I have a chance of getting through the finals? And he's like, I think so. I think. And then he sort of like wrote down who he thought like really deserved to get through, and he was right on everybody. Or maybe 4 out of the 5 he had picked on his, and the other one was like honorable mention, 6th place or something. I was like, oh, okay, wow, yeah, that's really good. And the judges on that panel were like Rostropovich was on that panel, and so it was like he was listening, and he heard it, and he predicted, and so I think that was sort of reaffirming. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe he knows something, even though I didn't want to admit it when I was younger.
Felix, with us is Angelica. She says hi from Chile, Felix.
Oh yes, thank you, thank you, you still have
And
wonderful memories from Portillo, and all your help. So appreciated.
it was such an amazing summer. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for
incredible.
us, it was winter, so it was it was
Yeah.
January, so we were enjoying that, being in the sun and the spectacular setting, and more so just the spirit that you had at the festival, which I know is a big credit. I mean, as I've grown, as I've gotten older, I realized that organizations simply can't be great unless they're great from the top, and that was certainly the case. Like, you guys had everything like really thoughtfully laid out, but then the spirit was right. There was lots of love and care,
Mm.
um, and so even though we were loving being in the environment and being in some warmth, and just surrounded by natural beauty, the whole quartet, the whole Blair quartet, we were really enthusiastic and excited about the collaboration and the exuberance that the students showed, and that just fed us so that we had that same kind of energy. And there's cultural differences, right? So
Of
there's a
course.
cultural difference of what I grew up with my parents, and if you met my parents, you'd say, oh, so that's okay. I see why he's so reserved, or I see why he's quiet, or I see why he looks mad a lot of the time. um, but so there's where I am, and then there's the American culture, and what we're teaching here in the States, and then we go down um, to work with you all, and it's a completely different personality, and all with their strengths and weaknesses, I guess. And but we loved it. We loved the passion and the excitement and the thirst for hunger and music making. And so it was a fun time.
Great. I mean, we were so lucky to have you. And I have an image when you all the teachers arrived in Portillo, and then I saw it here, Alejandra, the teachers that arrived. So I go there, and then I went to bathroom before, and I came out and I see you and Steve. It's like I screamed because I haven't seen you for such a long time, probably 20 years.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was so beautiful for me to see you both again, and just to share our lives from with music, no.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was just, for me, it was extraordinary, and just like these conversations that we're having this morning, it's exactly that. This is the feeling that I want to create. That is why I call them UMICHile conversations. It's like to find a way that these two worlds can connect, and Portillo was an example of that, no?
yeah,
And I hope we can manage that. You can all come back and do something extraordinary together, no?
yeah. Yeah, I know everybody in the quartet was super excited, and as I say, the even though it was fun to get out of the states that time and be in all that beauty, and
Mhm.
um, what was really exciting was the work. So
Uh-huh. For the people that, maybe there are people that don't know about the festival, but this is a festival that we created for young musicians here in Chile. And the idea of the festival is to concentrate on chamber music repertoire. So we have string quartets and woodwind quintets, and we have teachers for each of the instruments. So the idea is to be together for 10 days, like really, really intense in an amazing setting in the Andes mountain. And so it happened that the Blair String Quartet came for the first version of the festival. And like, as we were talking, it was just amazing for me, especially and personally, that you were both at the festival in at the beginning of this festival, no? It was that I had this dream in my head for so many years, no? But I have to say that every year we have to make sure that we have enough money so we can continue. I wish that could be different, no?
yeah,
um, and also because it would be amazing if we could have a bigger festival, longer, with more teachers. So, well, that's the second part of the dream.
well, I mean, everything that you had done in the first year, and I'm sure the continuation into the second year, it certainly seemed like the foundation was being built the right way.
Mhm.
And anybody participating in any of the events of the festival or watching them could see the sort of transformative quality that it was having on many of the young people
Mhm.
in the festival, and so that um, those experiences for these young musicians are so vital,
Mhm.
and so that kind of inspiration and energy for them, I think, was you could really see it, and we loved it. So
Great, great. Felix, Chuy, the composer, says hello, Alejandra and Felix.
hello, Chewie. Yeah,
Caroline Lukianchik,
yeah,
our dear Carolyn. Hi guys, send love to you both.
yeah.
So we actually do have people connected at this time of the morning. Thank you everyone for being here with us. So Felix, tell me, how did you end up at Michigan? What happened before the University of Michigan for you?
Well, so when we met, it was actually my second time around.
Mm.
So when I went to do my undergraduate, I went to Michigan. And after my junior year at Interlochen, or during my, yeah, after my junior year at Interlochen in that summer, I was up there for the whole summer. And they kind of came through and had like sort of a competition slash audition kind of thing. And so I went and played for that. And so I got a sort of a full tuition scholarship to go to Michigan. And so my senior year, I'm going there. I'm not, it's only 60 miles down the road from where I grew up. Um, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a musician actually, and so I knew that I was thinking of universities, and and so I was thinking, oh, I could do a double major or something, when I got to Michigan, and so I got there, and um, it was probably a year in or so, maybe a year and a half into my time there when I realized that cello was definitely what I wanted to do. And I loved my time there. But at that time, the string department was in a state of transition. So this was around 1988. And my teacher at the time was Jeffrey Solo. And so it had come out that he was going to be leaving at the end of my sophomore year. And he took a job at Temple University in Philadelphia. And so they were because it was announced kind of late. They really had no way to get a replacement for him right away. So they told us cellists we're going to have an interim person your junior year, and while we do a search, and then we'll have a permanent person your senior year, the following year. I just thought, well, this doesn't seem very wise for me right now to have three teachers in 4 years. And on top of that, um, the violin department was turning over quite a bit too. So after my freshman year, Camilla Wicks left and took two of the violinists in my quartet with her. And then after the sophomore year, Andres Cardenas was going to leave and take a few students with him as well. And they were just plugging in new people. So it was sort of a tumultuous time, and I had decided at that point that I definitely wanted to do cello, and um, I needed a little stability, and I needed to really focus myself, and so I ended up transferring to Peabody in Baltimore. So I ended up there for my junior and senior years. I studied with Stephen Cates, a wonderful cellist, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience in some ways. Being in a conservatory environment, it felt a little bit like being at a summer festival, but all the time, you know. And so, like for me, it was like some good and some bad. I had a hard time adjusting at first because I missed the university lifestyle. I certainly missed my friends that I had there. Some who were people that I had made while I was at Michigan, and then some were lifelong friends that from my hometown that had gone there as well, who are family friends, Chinese guys that were my age that we were like brothers. Um, and so that was a little awkward at first, moving to Peabody and just kind of being in some ways unable to escape music because you'd be in your room and people practicing in their rooms right around you and stuff, and it was just 24/7. um, Whereas at Michigan I had things kind of neatly into compartments. you know I would go to the music school and I would absorb myself in music, and then I would leave the music school, go to Central Campus, do some classes, and I lived on Central Campus my sophomore year with non-musicians, which I found kind of refreshing and a good thing. Um, but after about a semester of sort of, figuring it out, Peabody, I of course really loved it, and made some very close friends there as well, and was just really excited about some of the musical experiences there. Um, and and so and that was probably that was one of the first times that I really started doing a little teaching. I started teaching at the Baltimore School for the Arts, and I just had two students. It was a city program, um, and but I really enjoyed these little guys that I was teaching in the process. Um, but then after that, I ended up going to New England Conservatory. I studied with Lawrence Lesser there,
Mhm.
um, and so I did my master's there in Boston, and that was wonderful. Really extraordinary group of cellists, and loved my lessons and chamber music. Great players, and the master's degree is so much more free. Even though I'd been coming from Peabody, which was already pretty wide open, there were like various things that I still had to do for my bachelor's degree there, and transferring things in, and so, but going to NEC and having that time to work, 2 years, not that many distractions. The courses that I took tended to be like courses where I had to play the cello, sonata courses, and various chamber music kinds of things, or performance practice things. So it was more about just being around the cello all the time, and that having those couple years to really focus and be not have very many distractions was very powerful. I and it's not always this way, and but I would wake up and just be like wanting to get the cello in my hands, and that's not, if you know me, that's not usually the case. Like practice for me is often very, as for a lot of us, um, is a battle, is a daily struggle.
Mhm.
And you've got to put in the work, but you don't necessarily like it. And for me, certainly that was the way. In some ways, I think it made me actually a very efficient practicer because I didn't want to be practicing longer than I had to. So like it's a battle of laziness versus like you've got to be prepared. Like I won't get up and perform unless I'm like over prepared. But on the other hand, I don't want to be practicing. So like something's got to give. So you become very very efficient and creative in how you practice so that you can learn what you need to learn as quickly as possible and not be wasting time.
Mm.
Um, but so I did those 2 years in Boston and loved it. And and then I spent a year in London. So I got a grant, Frank Huntington BB grant, for study abroad,
Mhm.
and that was enough money to kind of, and so I had in mind to go to London. And I was thinking about trying to enroll in the Royal Academy of Music there, but it wasn't quite enough money to cover all of that, and it would have been enough to kind of cover it for like one semester, but I really wanted to stay there for a whole year, and I didn't want to be worried about money at all. So I decided not to enroll in the school and have to pay tuition. So I got an apartment there and um, just took lessons with a couple of different cellists there. One was David Strange, who what at the time was the principal cellist of Covent Garden Orchestra, opera orchestra, I think, but or had been at maybe at one point, but at that point he was the professor at the Royal Academy of Music. So I would actually go to the academy to have lessons with him. Um, and then so I did that for a semester or for a few lessons, and then I ended up studying, also taking lessons with William Pleath, who was kind of a legendary teacher there in the UK. Taught Jacqueline Dupre and When She Was Young and all this, and so I would travel to his house and have lessons with him.
Mhm.
And then the grant was enough to cover all of my expenses and apartment, rental, which of course was quite high there in London, and cover my cost of living, and then I could go to as many concerts as I wanted and museums and things like that. So um, it was a really wonderful time to be really again focused on the cello, but having all these ideas coming to me in such a cosmopolitan city.
Mhm.
Um,
And
And yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
Felix, and I'm curious to know because it's interesting to hear that you move from one place to the other, and how 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 important were for you your teachers in terms of, because every teacher brings something from us, no? Like how were those 2 years that you were in Boston with Lesser, no? How was that experience? What what was so incredible about him, for example?
Yeah. Well, he just has a very sort of sophisticated mind, is able to break things down in terms of cello playing and with the bow arm and sound concepts, particularly with the cello. And then just a very, very thoughtful musician, um, looking deeply into the score. Um, Sometimes, he goes, well, what does this mean? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, how can you be playing this piece if you don't know what that word means? Like, that he's like, you need to get over the line. Of course, back then, like I tell my students now, it's like, how can you do that? Like, but for you all, it's just like, okay, let's turn on the phone. I like type the word into my phone, and then like 15, 20 seconds later, you have the word. For me, it's like walking over to the library, getting out getting a dictionary, and then like looking up the term over the library. So back then, like if there were terms that I didn't know, it was a much deeper, time consuming process to figure out what they were. Um, but so, questioning things in the score and so it was exciting and it was exciting to be in an environment of such wonderful cellists too. That like my studio mates were extraordinary players, and I drew great inspiration that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Many times I have heard that Boston is like the city of the cellists.
that's right. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's back then the joke NEC was nothing except cellos. Um, and now I think now it's just everything is amazingly strong for in the string department. Um, in fact, I talked to Mr. Lesser, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and he said, as things were starting to transform, and he's like, Felix, you're not going to believe this. We have like 46 violists here right now. I was like, oh, okay, that is different than when I was there. Um, and but yeah, this bouncing around, it was good for me. I got what I felt like the essence of each teacher. Um, and then after a couple years, although I could have seen spending more time with any one of them, um, moving on was not. I was not like, oh my gosh, I need more and more time. Like I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I had a couple years, and for me that was good. I know I think particularly the undergraduate, maybe a 4-year arc with somebody would have been pretty good too, to have a little bit more length. But for me, the couple years bouncing around actually worked out pretty well. It was 2 years at Michigan, 2 years at Peabody, 2 years at NEC, 1 year in England. The hard thing about it was as soon as I would make some connections or set down some roots, I'd up and leave. Um, and so that was sometimes difficult. And so when I finally got to Michigan to do my doctorate, actually I just sent a cassette tape to
Mhm.
Erling Blondell Bengtson, who was the cello professor at Michigan at that point, and wonderful Danish cellist, and or I should say Danish slash Icelandic. Um, and I had met him because he had judged a competition ages ago that I'd played in, um, and I had spoken to him a little bit after it was over, um, and and so I contacted him. And I was in London, and I was thinking, well, what am I going to do? Like, I had all these connections that I'd built up in Baltimore and Boston, and then I left, and I was in London. And what am I going to do next year? I was thinking at the time I was just going to go home to my house, and I was just going to start practicing excerpts and start taking orchestra auditions. and maybe do the odd solo competition. But I kind of know myself that being at home was not the healthiest environment for me in terms of learning, because I get too comfortable there, and even if I've got like plenty of time, I don't have the drive. I think things are too nice for me at home or something, so I can just like exist day to day and be happy and wasting time. So I kind of knew that if I go home, well, how hard am I going to actually work? And so I decided it would be better if I were at an institution. And so I sent a cassette tape to Mr. Bankson, and I applied for the specialist program, which is like a diploma program at Michigan. And just with the audio tape, I did because I wasn't gonna fly back for a live audition, and so they took me, and I went back to. It was great to come back to Ann Arbor, which I still loved. And at that point, a couple of my close friends were coming back for a you know business master's of business administration, and then my younger sister was there in the midst of her undergraduate degree. Um, and so it was fun to be back in Ann Arbor. Um, and uh, I realized after somewhere in the course of my first semester that if I was there for any length of time, when I got there, I really didn't want to stay very long. I wanted to just go ahead and get a job. So I was going to start doing auditions and practicing excerpts. But you get into a school environment and you kind of get in all into the chamber music again and solo stuff, and I wasn't sitting there looking for every orchestra audition that was coming up. I was just playing, growing as a musician, and I kind of realized, well, if I'm going to be here at Michigan, I might as well be doing a degree that makes. Asked if I could switch my program into the doctoral degree, and they said sure. Um, and and so I started taking a few. It still left me plenty of time to practice and to do other things. But then I felt like, okay, well, if I'm going here, at least I'm like progressing towards this. I didn't really want to get the degree, but I started realizing that actually I wanted to be at a university. I didn't want to be in an orchestra anymore, and so
And Felix, it seems to me that DMA program was quite new, probably when you went into the University of Michigan, right?
yeah. Well, I don't know that it was really new, but it was not for string players and for some of the instrumentalists. It was not a program that was particularly popular. And I would say at that time around the country, doctoral degrees in performance were pretty uncommon.
Yeah.
Um, and I think maybe kind of with my generation, it became more and more popular because I think more and more of us started to realize that being at a university was what we really wanted to do,
Mm.
and that it was the possibility of being involved in the educational process, as well as the flexibility of what university lifestyle means. Like you set your own schedule, and you can run off to Portillo, for example, and just kind of adjust things, and it's no problem.
Mhm.
And you have incredible amounts of flexibility for your creative interests and your teaching interests. And if if the place is really good, I've been very lucky to be here at Vanderbilt. They in these these yours, and very symbiotic that works really well for both sides. And so I started realizing, well, this is really more what I'm after. And my parents were a little bit, so they were concerned about the whole music thing all along. So when I first got that scholarship to Michigan back when I was going to do my undergraduate degree, they were super excited, of course, because like they're not going to have to pay for it. But um, but my dad had always been thinking, you should be like an engineer, you should do something like that because it's really like steady work and it's good salary, and they never like they never put their foot down. Um, but they were always hinting that how are you going to make a living, and what is this? You need to just go do some real work. And um, but I think I'd been successful enough that they and it had shown things. I mean, my dad was like, "You don't even practice that hard, Like, why would you want to do this?" I was like, I felt like I was practicing, a couple hours a day as a high school student. I thought that was a ton, but I didn't realize, necessarily around the country that wasn't so much, or an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. But it was steady. I was disciplined about it. But it's like you don't even practice that much. Like, how are you gonna, how's this gonna work? But so here I am now doing the doctorate, and my dad's like, again, sort of like, what are you doing? Why don't you just go win one of these orchestra jobs? I know you can do that.
Mm.
And I said, Dad, I'm not sure that's exactly what I want to do anymore. And I think he was a little incredulous. Like, you're already going to have this nice. I think he came around to the idea of music once he started realizing how well these orchestras paid. He's like, oh, okay, well, then I don't have to worry about, if they pay that well, I don't have to worry about you. Like, it's not like you've got to go get that engineering job now. But other than here I am now hitting my mid 20s and I'm still floating around like, London and Boston, back to Ann Arbor, and no end in sight, like about getting some salary. And so he's like, what are you doing? Why don't you take these auditions? And I was like, I think I really want to be part of the, at a university. And I think that was starting to happen kind of around the country. And now you see all these kids who are wonderful, like getting doctorates. There's no place for them to go.
Yes, true.
Um, and I mean, I was lucky in the end. The doctorate didn't like, I didn't need it. Like, Vanderbilt didn't care that I had it.
Mm.
But like, I couldn't get, while I was doing the doctorate, I couldn't get an interview anywhere. Um, I would send my resume off, but because I was in progress and I hadn't completed, some of the smallest schools, I did not advance at all.
Yeah.
And the only place that I advanced was because they had a piano trio in resident, that I'd be part of this piano trio. So it was really important that the playing was very strong. So they bothered to listen to my recording, and but a lot of the other smaller schools weren't interested at all. So eventually, I and then I started building a pool of students there, some that I had inherited, from Derek Snyder.
Mm.
But and then I started picking up more. So I had 7 or 8 students, and I started to really enjoy the teaching. And then at that point, had been started teaching up at Interlochen for U of M,
Mhm.
and that's where you and I had some
Yeah.
fun times, and others too. But um, so I had shifted. I was really fascinated by this teaching, and really excited about it. And so I ended up finishing the doctorate at Michigan, and then I had a few months. I had moved to Pittsburgh to be with my now wife, Carolyn, as you know, Carolyn Hubel,
Mhm.
and and then as that the course of that year was going, all of a sudden I was getting all kinds of calls because I had finished the doctorate, and so I ended up here at Vanderbilt. But it was funny because they didn't, because it was part of this quartet position, they didn't even care that I had the doctorate.
Mm.
And it was more just about finding the right
But
player and teacher.
I think in general, when you are in the academia, they consider that. I remember also when I finished at Michigan, my DMA, it immediately opens up possibilities to teach, mostly.
Yeah, because these smaller schools, they really want to show how many of our faculty have terminal degrees,
Yeah.
have doctorates. So they don't want to hire somebody who doesn't have a doctorate yet. So then all of a sudden that year, then it was like, I started getting calls, and I ended up being most interested in the place that didn't even care that I had done the work. But
Katri, Katri says something here, which is the same case for me. She says, DMA was the same way for me. She says, I just wanted to keep on going to school, not with a goal to go into academia,
yeah,
just to get better before entering into the real world.
yeah,
That's exactly what happened to me too. Well, I did my master's at Michigan and I was really young and I wanted to continue studying.
I
And I said,
remember you
I
when you
want to
came
do
to.
my DMA.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when you came to Michigan, you were like this little cute girl who seemed so innocent with the little glasses and just long hair back then and wouldn't
Yeah.
say a word, you know? And little did I know that, like, underneath this, what seemed like a very shy person, very quiet, all of a sudden is crazy and enthusiastic and passionate. But I do remember when I think it must have been maybe my second year there when you arrived or something,
Mm.
and then kind of getting to know you. But then the time that we spent up in Interlock, and then really kind of understanding.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was really young when I went to Michigan. I think I started my master's when I was maybe 19,
Yeah, I think so. I
and
remember.
and then my DMA when I was 21. So it was really like ahead of of the usual age. But and now I don't consider that a good thing. But now if I look back, I would probably would think I would love to do my DMA now, so I could
Yeah,
really like appreciate it,
yeah,
all the classes and
yeah.
but but that's life, no?
Yeah, and I've always loved being in school as a kid,
Yeah.
and now being at a university, my whole life has revolved around the university calendar.
Mm.
Fall means certain things to me, not just the changing of the weather, but it means, okay, here we go. Here comes the start of a new school year, and
Yeah.
spring.
But also Felix has something that I don't know if it is important to you, but it is for me. It's so important to have time or even energy to keep growing as a musician, not to create new things, to create new projects. And I think the academia helps that. Just like you said, that you have probably more freedom to go to a festival if that is the case, no?
Mhm.
How important is that for you to really feel that you're still growing, that you're still being creative? Um,
Yeah, the thing is that being here, like for the long haul, you have time on your side. There you don't have, like, of course things work well when even though you have all this time, you still work like there's a sense of urgency,
yeah.
versus just kind of sitting back. Um, but every day is an interesting day. Like, you're never sure what you're going to discover in these lessons with students, and then that might spark you into wanting to start a different project, um, and of course, being surrounded by amazing colleagues and being able to perform with them, it's always inspiring. And even just some of the stuff that happens on campus that's not in the music school, it's just the whole process of it of at a university I've loved, and very excited to be a part of. So it's and I think now my dad looks at my life and he's really proud and excited and jealous in some ways. He worked every day, or both my parents, 9 to 5, um, and then um, and that was set. Um,
Mm.
and kind of the similar kinds of things to do every day. And whereas the flow of my week changes from week to week, and it's exciting. It's
Yeah.
fun. It keeps you
And
keeps you alive. So
and Felix, well, we all know that you play in the Blair String Quartet, and and Steve Miyake plays in this string quartet, which I recall him to be extremely talented musician, and he was like one of the youngest ones at the university. No, how 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 did that happen? How did like Steve I mean, it's amazing how he ended up in the same quartet with you, and how has been that your relationship with him, and just for the fact that you both went to Michigan and you actually knew each other there, no?
Yeah, so actually, I didn't overlap with Steve.
Oh, you didn't.
No,
Okay.
so Steve's about 10 years younger than me, and
Mhm.
um, and so we met in this orchestra, this chamber orchestra in Memphis, the Iris Orchestra.
Iris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is Michael Stern's orchestra. So we met there. Maybe just I was there at the very first concert, but he was probably there maybe one season in, or maybe he was there in that first season too. I can't remember anymore. But so we had met at that time, and I think he was very young at that point.
Mhm.
Like maybe like 21 or something, or 20 or something, and so I was a decade older, and he didn't mind hanging out with an old fogey like me, I think. Um, and so, of course, we were making music together, but it's a wonderful family atmosphere. We only get together a few times a year, so everybody comes back, and it's really nice to reconnect. So over the years, got to really know his playing there, and my wife Carolyn also knew, played in the orchestra there, and knows him from. I think she had done a festival in Colorado where he was there. I think it was Itzhak Schotten's festival,
Mhm.
and so they kind of got to know each other at that point, and then reconnected at Iris as well. Um, and so it was only about 5 years ago or something, or not. Gosh, it's probably more now, 6 or 7 years, when my first violinist of Blair Quartet was going to retire. So I was, I kind of, I knew Steve at that point had already been teaching at a couple of different universities, and then was at that point I think was at Ohio University, and so I mentioned to him, um, we're going to have this opening. I'd really like you to apply. I don't know if you're interested at all, but um, and so he did, and that was great, and we knew he'd be great. He left a wonderful impression. Beautiful player, beautiful violinist, really obviously good colleague, and that becomes critical, right? Like, because you're choosing, it becomes really important for the university, but it also becomes extra important because, like, here we are in a string quartet, and we're rehearsing every day. Um, so we knew we needed to have somebody that was going to be of the right personality. Um, for both being a first violinist, but also as a colleague. Um, and so he really won us over. We had some wonderful people apply, and it was really, really hard. I mean, it was, um, trying to figure all of that out, but he made it a little bit easy on us because of that. So
And
yeah, so it's been great. And well, like, so for Jared Hauser, who I met teaching up at Interlochen with you, and I was on that search committee, and I asked him to apply back then, and he did, and he ended up winning our oboe position, so he's been here all along too, even longer, maybe 12 years now, 12, 13 years now, I guess. So some of the connections are strong, and we've got several other alumni at Michigan. Obviously, my wife, Carol Hubel, and then but we've got other people on our faculty from the University of Michigan too. So it's pretty. There's a strong influence here from that school.
great. Um, Felix, we are running a little out of time, but I'm curious to know. Of course, this year is exceptional, but what is your like schedule in terms of your string quartet at the university? How does it work?
Well, yeah. So this year is kind of an anomaly. So we, like, really, our schedule this year has been completely different, and we're going through a viola search now. So, but because there's none of our out of town concerts, none of that's happening, our schedule is much more condensed. And so we've been going through and doing, the two performances, one each semester, working on that, but we're not working as intensively in between the run up to the concerts, and just focusing on our teaching. But typically, we rehearse about 2.5 hours a day, Monday through
Every day.
Friday. Yeah, Monday through Friday. Some days it's two, some days it's three, and so we fit that in around our teaching, and we all typically have anywhere from 10 to 15 hours of teaching of students. So it can get really quite full. And then I play in a piano trio with Carolyn and one of our piano faculty, and we rehearse 4 or 5 hours a week. So the actual amount of contact hours that I face every week is quite a bit, and just kind of fitting things in as we go. But I love it because I get to play all the best things for the cello. Cello, quartet cellist and piano trio cellist, and then I do my own solo recitals, and so I'm able to keep busy that way. I love the diversity of what I do, but yeah, and then it's flexible enough that I can get, I tend to make one day really full, Tuesdays, and where I just go morning until evening, really long, and that allows me to be a little bit more free in the other days. So I've got 3 kids, and I've been able to. My oldest now is a senior in high school, and she's actually considering Michigan,
Uh-huh.
and she's a wonderful violinist. But and then I have a freshman in high school, and I've got a 6th grader. But so over the years, it's been great because I've been able to be a big part of their lives, and picking them up from school and being basketball coach and baseball coach and that kind of thing. And so that lifestyle, because the hours are not rigid, I've been able to manipulate it so that I'd have plenty of time for family life. And because Carolyn has a similar kind of schedule, we're pretty good about figuring things out so that people, like one of us, can cover a lot of the things, if not both.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Felix, I told you that this past Friday the Dover String Quartet was in Chile, like virtually. They're really wonderful group. And after the concert, we had a conversation with the first violin and Roberto Diaz, who is the dean of Curtis Institute, and something sounds like something really beautiful he said about the process of learning. And I want to end with this because I'm also curious to know. I would love for you to tell me, but after this, what would you suggest to the young musicians in this period of pandemic, no? But something really incredible said Roberto that it got stuck in my mind, and I really feel this is quite interesting, is that he said that most of the students, of course, we have wonderful teachers and the students learn from the teachers, but it's so important also how the students learn from each other, no? It's like you listen to someone, it's like, oh, I love that. Or also in a way, is this idea of comparing each other, hopefully in a healthy way, no? And he called this like an ecosystem, like, and it made total sense to me, like how to create this ecosystem that we all get inspired from each other, and the idea is that like I exist if you exist, no? And I just love this idea of creating this environment where all the students can keep growing, nurturing each other, and not just learning from the teachers, but from even just a conversation, no? That it might seem so like maybe easygoing, but at the end it's like, oh, that's very interesting. I will try that, no? So if you could maybe end this conversation by inspiring the young musicians, what would you say to them to keep to keep inspired during this time that somehow we have to create that inspiration from within, no?
Yeah, it's certainly not easy right now. I mean, there's no doubt that this remote learning hits us musicians the
Mm.
hardest. Maybe just some of the scientists who can't be in their labs and things like that have it just as difficult. But I think some of the other people on campus or some of the other kids around the country learning, this is hard. You know, I haven't seen like one of my pre-college kids. I haven't seen him live since February.
Mm.
And you know, luckily we have this technology. Can you imagine if this had happened like when we were coming through? But um, the shared experience of learning is such a powerful tool. It's very it's impossible to replicate, really. And you mentioned, okay, yeah, so inspirational teachers and things like that that really, and coaches that can get you thinking. But always for me, my peers were so important. The friendships that I made and the, like you say, the conversations, as well as the inspiration that I, you know, sitting down to listen to them in studio class and gleaning. Oh, you know, even if it's sometimes as small as that one phrase, I'm stealing that forever, or that was so moving the way you know, and so there's always this common shared experience of like we're in the practice rooms together at the same time, or we're in these classes at the same time together, or we're actually in orchestra, or we're playing chamber music together. Um, so important. You know, how to do that right now, I'm not exactly sure what the best idea is. You know, one of my online festivals, we had a universal, you know, practice hour wherever where all the kids would log in at the same time and then just put on their gallery views and then mute their, but they're like 16 or 18, all practicing at the same time. They could see each other. And there was that sense of community, which is so important, or as you were saying, Roberto Diaz described as an ecosystem.
Mm.
And you know, I tell my students to make friends with the composers and have them write for you and exchange those ideas. And I remember when I was at the University of Michigan my sophomore year, and I just decided that year I wanted to experience a lot of different things playing wise. And so I decided I was going to say yes to anybody that asked me to do anything. So I ended up playing on an oboe recital and a flute recital and a harpsichord recital, and I played in the there was a chamber ensemble that Robert Reynolds was doing that needed some players and asked, and I was like, I'll do that, and so that whole year I said yes to everything, and it was great, you know, and I was running around doing all this stuff, and I had no idea what it was gonna, you know, what it was gonna be like, because a lot of times the people that were asking me to do stuff were not people that I knew at all. And so I knew that I was going to throw myself into experiences that with not only different musical impulses, but different personalities, and that I was going to grow as a human that way. Um, and so that active sort of pursuit of wanting to do different things was so important. And when I got back to the University of Michigan, you know, and you were there, and you know, I was active in the new music ensemble, and I was starting to teach and starting to play some chamber music and got to play occasionally with the faculty, and my one of my regrets was not asking every single composer there to write me a piece, you know, because back then they would have all just said yeah, absolutely, you know, because they wanted their stuff to be heard. Now I got to pay them 10 grand to get a piece probably. So it's like, okay, you know, go out there, make friends, and get out of your comfort zone and expand, you know, all the different ways that you can learn. And it was great having also coachings with instrumentalists that don't have a bow, you know. It's like, okay, they're not so interested in some of the mechanics. They're like, we want to hear what's coming out, and that's got to be right. So, you know, going to coach with Martin Katz or Richard Bean or some of the, you know, Derek Hodaki. It was great. So
Yeah, I also was a person that would say yes to everything. And sometimes I don't will be like from one rehearsal to the other. But now that I think back, it's like the best thing I could have done. No, I learned so much repertoire just by doing. No.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's so important, you know, to say yes. It's also I've learned important to say no as
Of
I've gotten
course.
older,
Yeah.
but there's got to be a time for both, and it's that sort of mixture of things that can really be a good formula for success down the road.
Mm. So Felix, thank you so much for being here this morning and
Yeah,
sharing your own experience, musical experience, and personal experience. And I'm so thankful for sharing your life with us, and also to reconnect with what at least for me were five of four of my best years, musical years in my life.
yeah.
So thank you very much for being here, and thank you everyone for sharing some reflections. And you can, Felix, read them also in Facebook. Some people mention a few things, and so thank you again everyone for being here, and I will see you this coming Sunday. And so far the same schedule. We will see if I change it, if it is too early for the United States. um,
Yeah, sorry about the we were having confusion about the daylight savings, but
yeah. So thank you, Felix, and thank you also for being part of the Portillo family. Thank you to the whole quartet. We had the best memories of our first year, and I hope we will get together again and make music together. Hmm?
thank you, Alejandra. Yeah, thanks for your inspiration too.
Oh, thank you. And so thank you, everyone. And we will see you next Sunday. Bye bye.
Bye bye. There we have.